Ashleigh, welcome to the podcast. Excited to have you, a fellow agency owner. Of course, you do things a little bit differently than we do at Nomad Creative. So let's just dive right in. And if you could share with us what it is that Mira Media Agency does and how you've been supporting other entrepreneurs in the last few years.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. So my name is Ashleigh Kuniski. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mira Media Agency. We essentially are a full service paid media agency. So if you think about any type of paid advertisement, that is our niche. So I kind of wrap it up into like both traditional and digital media. So traditional meaning like television, radio, billboards, any type of out of home. We do that. But then we also, I'd say 99% of our business is digital. So we manage Google ads, Meta ads, LinkedIn ads, Pinterest, programmatic, connected TV, anything and everything, you can name it. So there's a
Mm.
lot of agencies out there that kind of like focus on maybe one channel or two channels. We are really like a full service paid media agency.
What do you feel like is like the biggest mistake people are making when it comes to paid media?
I think not giving it enough time.
Mm.
We are like so at the realm of needing to train the algorithms and train the machine. And we're kind of at that stage where it's like, even though we might not like it, we have to deal with it. We have to take the time to train it and really make sure that we're making those optimizations. So being in the seat where sometimes you get clients that are like, okay, it's been, 2 weeks and I'm not seeing any results. We really do need to see that through and give it at least 3 months before you are going to make some of those decisions, because what works for one client may not work for the other. So you do need to have that consistent, not only training of the algorithms, but also optimizing and testing and seeing what works. So I think patience is definitely a virtue in this industry.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what's tough too, especially when you're spending so much money on something and you're like hoping for a specific outcome. When it doesn't happen right away, like your instinct is to just pull away, which I think it's good to always test with smaller amounts first, right? Like I'm sure you could agree. Test the messaging, test the imagery, see what's working. And then once you figure that out, then you can push more ad dollars behind the ones that are working, And like you said, constant optimization, because your ads can also get tired, right? People might always be seeing the same thing, but you might still be targeting some of the same people. Maybe it just wasn't the right time then. So you want to make sure that they're not just like turning away because they're like, oh, I've seen this before, it's not for me. Instead, maybe like grab their attention with a different hook or a different image, and then kind of like regain their interest and then potentially convert them down the line when they might be a little bit more ready, right?
100%. And I think you touched on another really big mistake that happens is that sometimes like they will just hire a paid media agency and expect those paid ads to be like the end all be all to their marketing efforts and their
Right.
objectives. When in reality, what needs to happen is that you're consulting on the entire customer journey. The click is just one piece of that customer journey. But when they land on your website, maybe your website isn't, user friendly. Maybe it's not mobile optimized. Maybe the lead form is hard to fill out and is a little clunky. And then maybe they fill out the lead form and your sales team takes 10 days to follow up with them and there's no nurture sequence. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration instead of just like hoping that your paid ads are going to be the magic solution. You cannot outmarket a bad customer journey and customer experience. So we really try to come in and say like, okay, before we start running anything at all, let's do an audit of this entire system. Like, where are they
Mm.
going once they purchase, once they fill out that lead form? What is the process? Because all of that needs to work together in order for you to even bother doing paid advertising.
Yeah. And I mean, for businesses who've never done this before, too, it's very overwhelming and it's very daunting because you don't know what to expect and you don't know what's right and you don't know what should be done. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, I'm thinking of running ads, this is what's going to generate all the revenue in my business, like it might play a part. But like Ashleigh said, think about what's happening before that person is clicking and then after they're clicking, right? So let's break it down a little bit. What are the before things? Like what happens before the click?
Yeah, I love this question. So, in terms of the before, that's really the time spent taking the research. So, looking into who is your target audience, who do you want to be intercepting, where are they spending their time online, how much time are they spending online, and also what are their pain points, and then how do you solve those pain points? So it's a lot of really deep research to understand like what should your unique value proposition be. And if you don't know what your UVP is, aka unique value proposition, you need to start there. That has to be your very first thing, because you need to convince people why they should be choosing you, especially in a world of, so many different competitors in different industries. So that's really kind of the first thing. And then once you know where your audience is spending their time, then we build out the media strategy. From there, you then need to make sure that your creative is
Okay,
resonating
wait,
with
wait,
your
wait, pause,
audience.
rewind. Media strategy. Some people might not know what a media
Yes.
strategy is. So could you explain a little bit more what that is?
For sure. Okay. So once we know kind of who that target demographic is, where they're spending their time online, we will then look at what channels makes the most sense to intercept this audience with. And we look at it at the lens of two different sort of tactics. One being demand generation, which essentially means like building demand for your brand. So maybe you're new to the marketplace and people have never heard of you before. You need to let people know that you exist. So that is
Right.
more about demand generation. So think about it as like maybe using a video to promote your products or services and doing that education, letting
Mm,
people know who you are, what you do, how you can help. That is one piece of it. And then the second piece is demand capture. So how are we going to then take those people who have shown interest or shown intent and make sure that they visit your website and convert? So our media strategy is comprised of those two different types of tactics. And then depending on the maturity of your business, the budget breakdown between those two pieces of the funnel are going to be very different. So
right.
if you're somebody like a Coke or a Pepsi who have been around forever, you don't need a lot of demand generation because everybody is already aware of who you are. So you need to focus more so on the demand capture and getting people to convert and visit your website and take action. If you're a brand new startup that is either maybe creating a category or is just new to a category in general, you're going to need to spend more in that demand generation category because you need to make people aware of you. No one is going to search for your product or service or your brand name if they don't know that you exist. So
Hmm.
within those two types of tactics, we then determine the best media channels for that. So it's not just about the channels, but it's also about the format, like I said. So video is a really great way to, generate brand awareness, and then something like search ads. So Google search and Bing search is a great way to capture that demand because you're focusing on people who are already searching for your product or service.
Yeah,
That's a
makes
really
sense.
like high level way to kind of explain it, but I hope that made sense.
No, high level, but also at the same time, I think like easy enough for the average person who doesn't have a lot of experience or expertise in this area to understand, right? Because like you said,
Mm-hmm.
it is complicated and this is why we hire experts
Yeah.
to help us, And then one of the things that you mentioned too is about like the fact that like they won't see you, right? Like they won't see you unless like you're spending money and putting yourself in front of other people. And this is one thing I want everyone to remember and to be able to distinguish, especially today, because the way social media is designed, like unless you go viral, virality doesn't last forever. That's the other thing, right? So you have to, if
Mm-hmm.
that does happen to you, you got to figure out how to either recreate that or like pull from that virality and keep people around. And if you don't already have like some kind of system in place, like you said, this is kind of the after click situation that we're going to talk about. Then it's easy for them to just kind of come and go, right? And people think that just by having organic social media that they're going to blow up. And this is, something I've seen time and time again with some of the businesses that we've branded, they launch and they don't have a proper like paid ads strategy or come to market strategy. And like, yes, organic is important 100% because that's where you're building that brand awareness. That's where you're able to build trust, where people are going to stick around. Like you have to be present. You have to exist online. It's just a basic like requirement now with businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is that back then it was a lot easier to just use hashtags and like mess with the algorithm to get in front of more people, whereas now it's like unfortunately we have no choice but to use some kind of paid media, right? So let's continue now that we've done this strategic portion, we know who we're targeting, it finally gets in front of the right people, they click. Now what?
So now they need to be sent to a landing page that is relevant to the ad that they just saw. So if you're running an ad for, I don't know, let's just say it's like a new granola bar that is grain free. if they go to your website and that landing page is talking about maybe a different product that you've launched, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's just the homepage and it's too overwhelming,
Yeah,
that
the
is not a good
homepage.
user experience. Oh,
Yeah,
the
I've seen
homepage,
that a
like,
lot. I've seen that a lot. Yeah. And they're like, oh, like I wonder why they're not. It's because they're clicking the ad saying like there's an offer, and then they're brought to a website with tons of pages that they can't figure
yeah,
out like where to actually find the offer. Yeah, that specificity on
100%.
that landing page is so important.
So crucial. And especially if it's something like Google search, right, where you are getting so specific about the keywords you're intercepting, you need to make sure that it is extremely relevant. So, it's typically best practice to actually have a unique landing page for every single ad group that
Right.
you're running in Google Ads, which
Yeah.
some people can definitely get intimidated by. But once you have a really great template, I would say, get that format, get that user experience down, and then just be duplicating that, adding in the content, making sure the keywords are relevant. That's kind of the first thing.
I'm actually curious though, from your perspective and like what your team does, because I know that there's a lot of apps out there like ClickFunnels or Go High Level that kind of create this whole funnel system for you. However, some people also just like create landing pages off of their own websites and then do this whole custom funnel. Like, what do you guys do, and what do you recommend for someone who is just kind of starting and thinking like, oh my God, I have to create a whole other page for every single offer? Like, what do you recommend they do?
I would say, like, it honestly depends on the resources that you have. Like, if you
Right.
have a web team internally and you're big enough to do that, then I would just say, like, keep it within your own existing web ecosystem.
Right.
You can definitely use something like a Go High Level or like an Unbounce, but that is definitely more so if you like don't have the resources internally. I truly, to be honest with you, haven't done like a direct test of testing like an Unbounce page versus like a landing page directly from your own CSM. So I can't speak to that entirely, but there are resources out there if you're intimidated about creating landing pages. Like, you don't need to do it directly within your website. You can do something, even like HubSpot. You can create landing
Mm-hmm.
pages through HubSpot if that's your CRM.
And they make it
So there's a
easy,
lot
like
of
a drag and
resources.
drop. Yeah, like a drag and drop
Totally.
situation too. I mean, I would just say definitely make sure your branding is on point, because with those drag and drops
Yeah.
can look really tacky and not well done. So like, yes, it's easy for you to do, but also make sure that there's a designer looking at it, because it matters. It matters what it looks like.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And exactly. Like, not just, it's not that the content is the only thing that people are looking at. It's also the aesthetics and the branding
Yeah.
and all of that together. So it has to match the experience they're expecting to get.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Keep going.
in addition to that too, sorry, the other thing that people kind of forget about when they are driving people to a landing page is the actual call to action. So we actually were just auditing a website for a client this morning, and literally you had to scroll for like 10 full seconds before
Mm,
you got to the only call to action on the site, which was in the footer.
right.
And that's just not how people operate. Like, if you look at a heat map of your website and where people are going, I bet you 99% of them didn't even reach the footer. So you need to be having that call to action very consistently placed throughout the website. And if not, directly above the fold. And when I say above the fold, I mean like when you land on a website, you need to see what that call to action is without having to scroll. So
Hmm.
that's kind of our rule of thumb, is make sure that that is there.
Yeah. And to clarify for anyone who's like, what's a call to action, otherwise known as CTA, otherwise known as a button, right? It is a button. It is something you want people to press to submit their information, whether it's their email, well, it's usually their email in addition to other elements. Um, and there's actually a bit of a strategy in regards to that too, like the form on how specific you get versus not, because the less specific you are, the more leads you'll likely get. However, they may not be as qualified, and the more questions that you put in that form, the more qualified your leads will be, right? So it's like you're basically going through this kind of process of elimination and making sure that these people are your client or your target audience, right? And so what's a couple of examples of CTAs? It's like, buy now, or give us
Book
some
a
examples.
demo,
Yeah.
start a free trial, even just sign up for the newsletter, right? Like, sign up for
Mm-hmm.
updates. It could be, sign up for, you could actually have like a Calendly link directly on your website as well and get them to book a meeting, right? Like,
Right.
it
The
depends on your
action.
product, but
Yeah.
the
The action
action.
you want them to
Yeah.
take. Cool. Perfect. And do you feel like there's a difference too in the way like B2B versus B2C brands, if you're going like direct to consumer or not, and like how you should advertise and what your funnel should look like?
So I think what people tend to forget is that I spent the last like 5 years working in B2B sales specifically, but the 5 years before that, I was in B2C, and now we kind of do a mix of it. What people tend to forget is that when you're advertising in B2B, you're still advertising to people. They are still human
Yeah.
beings at the end of
Yeah.
the day. So there used to be this school of thought that like B2B advertising needed to be completely different and an entirely different approach and different system. And while I do agree that there are definitely some strategies and tactics that I have seen work better in B2B versus B2C and some channels that do perform better. However, we still need to remember that like they are still human beings. They're still sitting on their couch watching TV. They're still commuting to work. They're still going to the gym.
Hmm.
They're still doing these activities that we are going to see with both B2C and B2B clients. So I think that we need to remember that instead of just like sending them this robotic, very like clean cut LinkedIn ad that has like an ebook picture on it with a very bland call to action. We are not going to stand out because there's 25 million other B2B brands doing that exact same strategy. So I think with B2B, you almost need to have a B2C mindset in order to actually make some noise in the space and stand out a bit. So I'd say that is the
Hmm.
big thing, is just remembering that they're still human beings and they want to see creative and funny messaging and not just have it be, the standard thing that they see on their feeds.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where your brand comes in too, right? And defining like who you are, communicating to your audience, all of those things in that initial strategy, they're coming through now, right? And then there's the visual elements as well of your brand. So all of the little pieces come together. I think that's like, especially when there's like really, really early businesses, they don't give enough attention
Mm-hmm.
to actually building out their brand suite. So it's like things are like mixing and matching. And the one thing that you risk in doing that is that when things are not cohesive and there's no consistency throughout, when you're jumping from, let's say, your social channels to your website to then your ad, um, to the landing page, like all of those things need to look the same to a degree, of course, like, but your branding elements, your colors, your fonts, like you need to always have that cohesion, because so you lose risking, number one, the customer, and number two, just like the integrity of your brand.
Yeah.
And the integrity of your brand is really like what will make your business grow and be recognizable over the years, right? Like you need all those things. Like we know Apple when we see it, we know Amazon when we see it, we know all like Google when we see it. Like I named the biggest ones, but still,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we recognize them, and there's some smaller brands too, like whether they're local, where they do a really, really good job, and you see their little icon or illustration, and you're like, oh, that's them, and like immediately, like that is good branding.
Mm-hmm.
So think about like, as anyone listening, think about what you can do with your brand to make it unique, to make it stand out. Like, yes, that consistency is important in terms of those visual elements and the messaging, but also like what makes yours be a little bit different, whether it is in the messaging or in the visuals or whatnot, right? There's like a million things, but that's where
I
strategy
know.
comes in, baby.
One of my favorite case studies, and you have probably come across this as well, is with Monday.com, because they just entered the space. I don't know exactly how many years ago now, but when they first launched, they were everywhere. You saw them
Mm,
on billboards, TV ads, radio ads, like traditional and digital media. And they actually came out with a case study a couple years after this and basically said, we spent every single dollar that we had on marketing in the first 2 years of business. And
wow.
now we are a huge name brand because
Hmm.
everybody knows who we are and they know to come to us, and it's built that credibility and notoriety for us. So they didn't turn a profit for the first couple of years in business because they knew and valued the importance of that brand messaging. And now it's one of those logos. It's very similar to Google. You see the colors and you go, oh, that's Monday.com. So I
Yeah.
love that strategy was taken.
Yeah, that's cool. And it also depends on like what your intentions are with your business and what you want to do with it. Cause if you're like a mom and pop shop, it's a little bit of a different story. But if you're a brand
Yeah.
and your intention is to be global and to scale, it's not the first time that I've heard that, where you take that strategy where PR and marketing is at the forefront, and that's where all of your dollars are going. And for anyone who may watch Shark Tank, I mean, you're probably wondering like, where the hell is their money going? Like how come they're not profitable, when they're making like 2, 3, $4 million a year sometimes and they're not profitable? But it's because
Yeah.
they're spending that money on building that brand name so that eventually it'll become basically a machine that could run itself. And then all that money
Mm-hmm.
will eventually be in their pocket, and, the team and everyone that works for them. So yeah, that's a great case study. Do you have any others, maybe like companies, brands that you've worked with where you saw something that really was just out of place, you had to fix and then put into play, and then saw like a huge transition in terms of like results due to the ads that you ran?
Ooh, I love this question because I think there's been quite a few of these, and I think one of the things that I see quite often is like sometimes clients have an ideal customer,
Mm-hmm.
but they haven't necessarily like done the work internally to actually fit with that ideal customer. So I had a client, this was a few years ago now, but they essentially wanted to move from like SMB up into the enterprise space. So they were only targeting small, medium sized businesses. And then they wanted to jump into like only getting in front of basically like 10 million plus in revenue every single month. That was a huge task because changing all of those systems internally, like you need an entirely different sales team, different sales process, different sort of nurture
Yeah.
stream to make that happen.
Yeah.
And just by like really tweaking our strategy. So a lot of it was focused on LinkedIn, Google search, and Meta. Those were the three channels that we were using. By using that like firmographic data that you can get in LinkedIn about company size, about job title and seniority, we were able to shift that strategy and also shift the creative. So instead of like, we would send out kind of freebies like, hey, download this template for your
Mm-hmm.
social media content calendar. And that would grab people. But that's only helpful for those small, medium sized businesses who maybe have, a coordinator running their social. But
Yeah.
if it's a larger size business, you need to make sure you're adding value in a different way. So we actually started launching case studies and white papers and ebooks because that content was more valuable for like the senior social media manager or the VP of social media rather than a media coordinator or like a social media manager, for example. So shifting that messaging and the content that we were providing for them really
Yeah.
made a huge impact as well. But that wouldn't have been possible if like internally there were not shifts as made as well on how they handled these new enterprise leads, because instead of talking to like one person and having two meetings, you're probably talking to eight different people and having maybe another 10 meetings to really get the deal closed through. So it's a totally different process on both the
Mm-hmm.
marketing and sales side.
Yeah. Super interesting. And like, I guess like from your perspective and your business, I know that you guys have been doing great. You've been growing 20% month over month, since launching, which is incredible. So like what are some of the practices that you, I guess, practice within your business in order to see that growth that maybe someone else could mimic or learn from?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for us, so most of our business right now has come from referral and from word of mouth. So I would say our number one reason why we are seeing that growth is because of our relationships and the client and customer relationship that we're building between ourselves and all of the clients that we have, because we actually have not had a single client churn since we've launched, and that is like
Amazing.
rare in the agency space. So
Yeah,
I
that's
kind of chalk
amazing.
that up to the attention to detail that we're giving them, because I saw this at one point and it really resonated with me. But if you have poor results and poor client communication, they're going to leave. If you have poor results but great client communication, they're going to talk to you about it. If you have great results and great client communication, they're going to stay. So as long as you continue to have that really great relationship and client communication with them and building that, they're going to at least have the conversation with you to say, hey, things are maybe not going as well as I thought they would from like a quality perspective or from a volume perspective. What can we do about it? But if
Yeah.
they're not getting that relationship and that attention to detail, they're just going to leave immediately without even giving you the opportunity. So I think that the reason that we've grown so strong month over month is just having those really consistent client relationships. And then therefore our clients feel comfortable referring us to the people in their networks that they know, and so on and so forth. So it's a lot of like just word of mouth and also people from our past as well that we've worked with and can vouch for our product offering and also the relationships that we build.
Yeah, I love that. And with service-based businesses, especially like having that open communication with your clients, it's a little bit, I mean, there's still a communication that happens when you're, like selling to the consumer, but it's not the same because
Mm-hmm.
you're touching base with them multiple times, either like a week or a month, depending on the situation and what the agreement is. and like building that rapport with them is extremely important, like
Hmm.
you said. Yeah, I can definitely relate. I think that's been like the biggest thing for us too in the beginning was all word of mouth referral, which is great. I think it only gets you like so far.
Yeah,
Because then if you, it depends on like your business plans. If you want to scale, then that's where that paid media comes in. So,
yeah.
it's only a matter of time. I know you guys are still like a smaller agency, as are we. So yeah, it's really amazing to hear that those referrals have been coming through, because that just means you're doing a great job. So yeah, anyone in service, I love, by the way, what you said. I'm gonna like go back and listen to it and use it, because it's so true. Like if one of those things are off, like they're gone, right? So having those two elements, being at the forefront and always reminding yourself like, okay, touch, because sometimes they're also quiet too, and like you are the one who has to reach out to them to be like, hey, is
Yeah,
everything good? How are you feeling? Because sometimes they're quiet or they feel uncomfortable bringing issues up, but if you give them the opportunity to, then most likely they will. So that's where you can
totally.
kind of save yourself before they disappear without any notice, because they weren't feeling great about the situation, but they were too afraid to really bring it up, or just uncomfortable to bring it up.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So before we wrap up the episode, we always end with what I call the mindful minute, where
Hmm.
we share some kind of advice. Well, you're going to share some kind of advice that you've gotten throughout your career, throughout your life, something that you can't necessarily learn in a textbook that you would want to leave entrepreneurs with today. What would that be?
I would say, I mean, there's two things that I always stand by, but the first one being make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you.
Mm,
And I really learned this in the first few years of my career when I kind of hit a point where I really just wanted more. I wanted to learn more. I really wanted to challenge myself. And honestly, it was the best thing I could have done for not only my career, but also my ego. Like I was sitting in an agency for 6 years and thought I knew everything. And then I was like, one day I just sat down and said, I think there's more for me to get out of this and to learn. So I actually went to a different agency in an entirely different category of clients, and I learned so much. And I'm so grateful that I took that leap, because
yeah.
if I had stayed stagnant and comfortable, I don't think I would be where I'm at right now, because I wouldn't know the things that I do. So really pushing yourself and making sure you're surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you, and just being humble enough to say like, I don't know the answer, and I'm going to ask the stupid question, because you're not going to learn if you don't do that.
Yeah, I think that like conscious leader mindset is really being, inspired and not intimidated by those who are maybe ahead of you, whatever that looks like. And I agree. Like, I have some relationships where I'm just so inspired by these people. And I think it's natural to feel a certain level of like envy, but not jealousy, right? Because you're looking up to them, you're excited, you see yourself potentially like getting to that point. But I agree, like you want to be surrounding yourself with people who've kind of walked in the path that you're looking to walk, to learn from them, but also remember that there are people who are looking up to you that are
Mm-hmm.
maybe also in that same space, right? So it's like as much as you can be a mentee, you can also be a mentor. So I think being humble in the process, and just fuck it. And in general, like success is all about collaboration. It's not competition. There
Oh,
like
yeah.
competition needs to dissolve. It is all about collaboration. I swear to God, like that's really like where the leaders stand. They're all working together. So I love
Yeah.
that. Thank you so much for being a guest today, Ashleigh. Where can everybody go to learn more about you and your business?
Yeah. So our website is www.myramediaagency.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Myra Media Agency, and then we are also on LinkedIn as well. Same thing, just slash Myra Media Agency. And then my personal LinkedIn is where we're most active as well. All about kind of trying to build that personal brand right now.
Love
So
it.
you can also find my first name and last name there on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, guys. I hope you learned a thing or two. I feel like I even got some takeaways. So thank you. And we'll be in touch next week. Bye.